Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm sure you all are very tired from the work day and having to face your bosses and colleagues and clients, maybe like hard clients, right? And so on. So as you all have come here, even though it's a work day, I'm sure the motivation pure is really pure, right? Just to attend a Dharma session. And the motivation, of course, in every start of each, as I'm always highlighting in every session, it's really important to have a good motivation in each of the Dharma sessions that you take, right? If the motivation is not good, then it's like having a seed that is not good, right? So whether your motivation is on generating bodhicitta and benefiting all beings, and whether it's what do we call uh, to improve yourself, whichever it is, then it's important to have that kind of pure thought, right? Instead of having the anger and the what do we call jealousy or whatever negative emotions that are there. So that's the thing. As in the previous session, we have already went through some of the verses, and the first day we went through being considerate and how being considerate is a root of all human values. And in the next session, we probably went through like having integrity and like what do we call having practicing humility and having equality and etc. Right? And all this. Now in the third session, probably, and also in the second session, we talked about how even though you have authority, do not be like what do you call like authoritative and egoistic about it, right? We covered all this in the second session, and in the third session, which the verse I think today is a gossipy day, right? So the verse itself, I think I stopped at verse number 12's third sentence, right? So check whether your associates, no, I think verse number 11. Yeah, verse number 11's third sentence. If something is definitely worth keeping secret, stay silent in a quiet place as if you are a mute, right? From here, we are going to talk about gossip. And I'm sure many questions will come about gossiping. So, so the sentence itself is really interesting, right? If something is definitely worth keeping secret, stay silent. Means if something confidential about your company or whatever, right, is a secret that you should not share, then it's better to, if somebody asks you, it's better to not answer, right? So the sentence itself basically says that, but it's also important to know that maintaining like confidentiality regarding some sensitive matters of maybe it can be of a company, right? Like maybe trade secrets, is that what we call it? Yeah, trade secrets of a company or uh, personal from a personal point of view, it may be secrets that should not come out, right? Eh, until the person themselves are ready. So uh, so here what we are saying is we should not share the secrets of others without their consent, right? Consent or uh, what do you call their approval, right? Their approval. So this basically says that you need to respect the sensitive information and not gossip, right? Not gossip about it, right? When somebody asks, even though deep inside we know that that should be kept secret, and even though we know that it should be kept secret, the person when the person asks, we the one to share with them overcomes the need to keep it secret, right? So I'm sure most of us have gossiped sometime in our life, and it's unavoidable, right? It's unavoidable in the place where you have lots of friends, and so a lot of different friends and colleagues were sometimes that. So that's really important to know that some not gossiping means respecting the what do we call the information, right? Respecting the information and the what do we call the individual's privacy for it not to be shared, right? So it also means not engaging in conversations that can harm the reputation of the other person or spread falsehoods, right? So, so now I think I'll throw open this question to all of you. What, according to you, is gossip? How do you define gossip, right? So, as we know that, then we will see whether you are the CEO of gossip or maybe a junior level, what do you call junior level, entry level colleague or worker of gossip. So, what according anybody can answer, right? Anybody can answer. What according to you is gossip? Sam, you want to answer? Yes.
Talking bad about other colleagues.
Talking bad over other colleagues. Okay. Then anyone else? Gossip. What according to you is gossip?
Okay, I suddenly start to think whether the word gossip, does it mean I must say something bad? What if I just talk about you? I just talk. I just talk about you. I share a lot of information about you. Is that gossip? No? Is that gossip? That's why. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Ask you to go.
yes. So first we must define gossip, right? To understand if we are gossiping or not. So gossip sometimes can just be like harmless information, right? Just harmless information. But gossip in a way is a secret spice of our life, right? Secret spice, isn't it? Isn't it? Like when you gossip, it just like it adds the taste of it adds the taste of the in the Indian we call it masala, right? We call it masala, but I don't know what we call it in Singaporean spice only. Okay, okay. So it's like a uh, spice that you add in the life, right? It's the guilty pleasure that we indulge in, right? In a way, we know that we should not do it, but that what do we call one to share with our friends, the fun to share the latest buzz, latest news, and the latest yeah, latest juicy news, right? And but let us remember that while it's fun to share this juicy news, while it's fun to indulge in the spice of life, but uh, it can be, it can create a problem, right? It can, and I'm not saying it will always create a problem, but so first, let's understand the gossip of nature. Gossip of nature, nature of gossip, right? Nature of gossip. So, gossip typically involves sharing information about others that is not necessarily verified, right? The less the gossip is verified, the more spicier it is. Does isn't it? Once it's verified, it doesn't count as a gossip. It doesn't count of suppose okay, so it is often sensational in nature, right? Sensational in nature. These are the spiciest ones, right? Let's talk about the spiciest gossip. So let's say in an office, it can be like some harmless chatter, right? Just say, let's say any harmless chatter that you indulge in today in the workplace, like harmless chatter, like just let's say what type of gossip? I can't even imagine, right? So harmless, it can just be like harmless chatter, or it can be a malicious, right? From the intent itself, it can be like to spread bad things about others so that they may get called up about by the HR. Is it HR? Human HR, right? Is the HR human resources? Is this the one? Is that the one who controls who to fire or not? Or yeah, like other, HR or your bosses, right? So gossip itself is often based on speculation, right? Facts cannot be gossip. Facts, there may be a secrecy that it may be a fact, but you should not be sharing it, right? So that we won't say it's a gossip, but gossip is often the little bit of unknown which you add a little bit of spice upon it so that it becomes juicy. Speculation, not verified, right? So that's what. So I think uh, this is the this is what gossip means basically. The based on speculation and adding spice to it without verifying the whether it's verified or not. So indulging in gossip means basically you are going against the teachings according to Buddhist perspective. You are going against the teachings of right speech and let's say right speech, and maybe you are indulging in one of the 10 non-virtues, right? Which is maybe it can be the gossip itself, divisive speech. One is divisive speech, and the other one is idle talk, right? Idle speech. So this is you are basically indulging in that. So when you indulge in that as a Buddhist practitioner, of course, these are the basic fundamentals. 10 non-virtuous things as the sorry, basic fundamentals of Buddhist teaching, right? It's a fundamental that every and each of Buddhist practitioners should practice, right? Regardless of how big of a practitioner, how practiced practitioner you are. So that's the thing. So that's the gossip that you should not indulge in, right? So let's discuss about different types of gossip, right? so we can gossip in the sense in the with the intention that uh, we want to get promotion, right? So if you spread this gossip, then maybe the higher ups may hear it and fire that person that so that you get their position. It may be that, but also like you can also gossip about their work performance, right? You can also gossip about according to a officer that guy, even though their boss said to do this, he didn't do that. Whether it's verified or not doesn't matter, right? You add the speculation and you add your own masala or spice upon it, right? So that's the thing. Suppose we gossip like this, right? We talk about their uh, competence behind their back, like saying this guy always leaves the work unfinished. You don't know whether he has left the unfinished work unfinished or not. It may be he may have already finished it, right? But you add the, it's a type of a lie. Let's not say fully a lie, but it can be a lie, right? So in the Tibetan, there is a thin line whether it becomes a lie or not, right? It can just be unverified. So that's the thing. So uh, we can also like gossip about the lifestyle choices of that person, right? So even though she doesn't have money to, even though they don't have money to do something or help her, but she has the money to buy a, let's say, Prada shoes, right? Prada shoes, or what's the other brand that I think, yeah, Gucci shoes, or whichever, right? So they don't have the money to. It's about basically that person may have enough money to maybe help their parents and have this type of luxurious life or whatever, right? Whatever they are doing right now. But you speculate. You don't know. You haven't verified anything. You speculate and add that spice, right? And talk about it. So that's the thing. Then also we can talk about their social media activity. He spends, okay, that is mostly like this type of gossip are there, right? Different types. We can, if we try to categorize each and every type of gossip, I'm sure we'll be left till tomorrow morning in this discussion, right? Each and every. So that's the thing. So gossips like this can be damaging to the culture that you are in, right? Culture, maybe it's suppose you are in office culture, or suppose you are in a group of friends. If you gossip about the other friend with the other friend, it may like there are like four groups of friends and you gossip about them, right? As long as they don't hear that you are gossiping about them, it may be the relation with them may not be constrained or uh, not strained, right? Not be affected. But once they hear that you are talking about them like this, then what's the general feeling you would have if you are that person that they were gossiping about, right? What's the feeling? So that it affects the trust, doesn't it? So if you find out that suppose your best friend is gossiping about you in that manner, then the if they come to know about it, then the relationship trust may be affected, right? So they may start to share, even if you are sharing always, like you are really trusting with others, trusting with that friend, then you slowly start to reduce what you are sharing, right? That's the impact of gossip having on the life, right? So in a workplace culture, it can impact team dynamics, right? Team dynamics is where you will have to work with a team, right? So that's the thing. So now that's the problems or the cons of having gossip. Of course, it's really hard to not gossip, right? So, but the solution here is focusing, reflecting on the motivation that why you are gossiping, right? It's important to understand why you gossip as yourself. Let's not say people, but as yourself, why you gossip. Uh, Let's try, let's just try this once, right? If you are starting to gossip, maybe I hope not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or somewhere else when you go, and then you are gossiping, try to reflect on the emotion, right? If you, even in the moment you can't, you gossip and finish, oh, did I just gossip? Try to recognize the moment, right? Then recognize the moment and reflect on the motivation for the gossiping, right? It can it can stem from a desire to fit in, right? Fit in with the friend culture or whichever, and a need for attention. It can also stem from a desire from a need of attention, right? Like uh, if you hear a gossip, suddenly what happens? The ears also spring up like a spring up like a rabbit, right? Spring up like a rabbit, and you listen carefully. So the other person, because of this attitude you may be presenting, that other person may also want to s- get that attention, right? Suppose you are just talking normal things and all, then the attention of the other person may not be there. But suddenly you start to gossip about the friend, common friend that you have. Then the ear becomes a rabbit ear, right? Yeah, probably like that. Or sometimes just sometimes we just feel bored, and to get rid of the boredom, we just talk about the what do you call gossip nature to make it interesting, right? So that's the that's the motivation. Basically, that may be the motivation. So sometimes in our office, because of office stress and the dissatisfaction that you may be feeling of the other colleagues, what do we call other colleagues, contribution or whichever, and that may be the reflections, right? So instead of big, recognize the motivation why you are gossiping, then trying to find the alternative, right? Instead of gossip, right? Trying to find the alternative. Then that may be better, right? So we must also, that's one thing, being mindful of the motivation of gossiping, right? Then, so that's the one thing. Then another thing is, so you must practice empathy and mindfulness, right? Before engaging in gossip. So basically, if you are gossiping about, let's say, let's just put out a name, right? You're gossiping about, what's that English? John Doe. We call it John Doe, right? Just a random name. John Doe. Like if you're gossiping on the John Doe, put yourself in the John Doe's name and think, what would you feel if you were the John Doe and you heard that they were gossiping about you, right? So, that's the thing, that mindfulness and emphasizing, the empathy may help you gossip less. Like, in workplace terms, you need to get promoted, right? From an entry level till the CEO. In the gossip level, you must go down. You must always be demoted. You must try to demote yourself from CEO to, let's get down to an entry level, right? So how to get down is all dependent on how the mindfulness is. You practice mindfulness before starting each and every conversation, right? So that's the thing. So that's the thing. So one of the things, then also having, that's the thing on, from an office perspective or an offline perspective. Let's say online, right? Online, you just write a, is it a tweet? We call it tweet or a post or whichever the platform is, we are doing. We just write a gossipy nature, right? Spicy in it. Then people start to come online, right? Then it may create more bigger problems, right? So that's the thing. So basically, what we are saying here is we should not gossip, right? So first, understand gossip. Just normal talk is not gossip, right? Suppose, let's say, somebody went there. If it's verified, it's a fact, it should not be considered gossip, right? But even though it's not gossip, it doesn't mean you have to talk about that, right? So here, when we say, if something is definitely worth keeping secret, stay silent in a quiet place as if you were mute. This also says about privacy consideration of the other individual or company or that, right? So so here, let's try to relate it to an online sense, right? So sometimes in, maybe I don't know how the culture is here, but sometimes maybe you saw a online post about something, you share it suddenly, right, without verifying the facts, right? You share it suddenly without verifying the facts, whether it has really happened or not. And you share that photo or whichever news is happening, right? Without verifying it. So that, here, may cause a problem, right? It may be unverified. We had a lot of these problems during, I think, COVID. Yeah, during COVID, like sharing unverified news, right? So here also, without the, what do we call, without the acceptance or approval of the other individual, we may share their photos, right? Like, which may harm their career or so on. So this type of is basically it's saying this: respect other people's privacy or respect other people's secrets, right? And keep it. If it's your own secret, that's up to you, right? Whether you want to share it or not. So, in according from a Buddhist perspective, Buddhism values the autonomy and dignity of each and every individual, right? Each and every so respecting someone's privacy online is a way of showing them respect, right? Is a acknowledging their right to control their what do we call information or what do we call digital presence. And it's also in a way practicing from a Buddhist point of view, you are also practicing non-harming, right? Non-harming. Basically, Buddhist from a Buddhist point of view, it's the fundamental, that is the fundamental teachings, non-harm, right? Non-harm to others. Whatever action you do, make it so that it doesn't harm others, right? Sharing someone's information, whatever secret, juicy secret, the spice that you have without consent can lead to harm, right? Can lead to harm. So it can be emotional harm for the individual. It can be a social harm, like a social pressure or social, what do we call that? Social blacklisting? Social blacklisting, is it called that? Or even like that, right? So that's that. So also you can think of this as respecting others' privacy can also be seen as a form of generosity, practicing generosity of the six perfections, right? The perfection of generosity, where you are giving others space and the respect that they deserve, right? So you are giving the space, you are giving the respect. So this is how you can relate keeping a secret. If you are practicing Buddhism, you can relate all of these practices in doing small things. Basically, Buddhism is a really easy practice, right? Sometimes it's a really easy practice. It depends on how your mind is doing the things, right? So if you there is a saying in Tibetan Buddhism that if you really know how to do dharma, whether you sleep, eat, or walk, everything you can be turned into dharma. So basically, that these are the things that we can do to change what we are doing in our daily regular lives and turn it into dharma. So doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you have to find special time for dharma, right? So the practicing best time for practicing dharma is during your own whatever you are doing, you are practicing it while doing the regular things that you are doing, right? These are the things. So that's the thing. Uh, so so basically the verse that is that the 11 one is that. So verse 12 is also like almost similar. This is a rough and general presentation. Check whether I have still more essential advice, so listen. Check whether your associates are hostile. That is being careful. So from here, I won't be reading all the verses, but from here, what the I think verse 12 and 13 are saying, you must be careful, right? So in a general world, it is really important to be careful, to check whether somebody else is taking advantage of you, whether somebody else is being hostile towards you, right? So that one, the second sentence, be honest while giving advice to Chandan. And that is being reliable, be careful, and do your recitations quietly. That is being dignified, right? Be dignified. And also like be honest when discussing faults. That is being skillful. Be skillful. So this is here. Oh, this is one of the things. While discussing faults, we must be skillful, right? We must not. If somebody has a point, sometimes if somebody is at a fault, sometimes we tend to take it. If it's related to work, we may take it personally and get angry and angrily point out the faults of others, right? That is not the right way. We should do it in a kind and what do we call kind way, right? You are doing, I'm not saying in the kind way like you are doing this, you should not do this. the wording and it should be taken into consideration, right? So that's the thing. So and dig out your faults yourself. That is being wise. Be unconcerned about the faults of others. That is being virtuous. So here, basically, I think six qualities are being described. Be careful, be reliable, be dignified, be skillful, be wise, and be virtuous, right? So the upper ones are just basically small examples of how to be virtuous, how to be careful, right? So firstly, here what it's saying is check whether your associates are hostile, and that's being careful. So whenever you are in a workplace, you can check whether your colleagues are being hostile towards you, right? Colleagues are bad mouthing you. You can check, but not get angry after checking that. If they are bad mouthing you, that means, okay, this may not be the right workplace for you, right? And that may not be the right workplace. Or you can communicate without anger. Without anger, you may communicate, right? Like the maybe how you felt and all, not taking it personally. So here what it's basically saying is have a careful association with the friends that you may have, with what do you call, friends you may have, the associations you may have, right? And it also in says mindful. Even though you are working, even though you must be kind, you must also be mindful of whether the other person is really being concentrate or really taking advantage or so on, right? So that's the thing. Then others, the verse 12 is basically that be honest while giving. So in the verse 13, I would like to highlight this one. Of course, if you are a practitioner, you should do your recitations daily and etc. But here, being honest when dig out your own faults, right? So in a way, when people dig out our faults, right? When people dig out our faults, how do you feel? A question that's open-minded, open-ended. How would you feel? Probably, who is he to? Of course, some of you may feel like, okay, that may be my fault, but most of the time we feel, who is he to point out my fault, right? In a workplace, suppose your colleague points out your work, points out the fault that you have done something wrong or so on. We may have that, even though we may smile, even though we may smile, oh, okay, so this is wrong, so something like that. Then in the inside, we are like already crushed, the, already crushed that person, right? So we may already have crushed that person and say, who are you to point out my mistakes and so on. So here, what is saying, you should dig out your own faults, right? During that time, it's here from what I've been talking from the first session till here, the mindfulness plays a really important factor in all of this, right? Like whether you are being considerate, whether you are being egoistic, whether you are digging out your own faults, right? Digging out your own faults and so on. Mindfulness is like a, what do we call, one of the uh base fundamental practices that you would need, right, to have all of these qualities, the being reliable, whatever, being skillful and digging out your own faults. So here, when others point out our faults, we tend to become aggressive, we tend to become defensive, right? Oh, I then we may give an explanation. Oh, this happened because I thought it was like this, which may be genuine. You may have done it like that. But if you are coming from a point that the motivation that's coming, you are saying this is because to hide your fault, then it becomes hiding your fault, right? hiding your fault, which is one of the mental factors in more than 51, yeah, 51, yeah, 51 mental factors. Also, there are a lot of more, right? So, so that's the thing. But we must know that digging out our own faults, and when somebody points out our faults, it's a what do we call? It's a opportunity for personal growth, right? It's an opportunity for personal growth. Of course, we are not perfect. We always think we are perfect, right? Everybody in this place may be wrong, but I'm the right one. We have that view, right? We have that, what do we call? Self-loving, too much loving, too much loving, cherishing, wanting your view to be the best view. Of, of course, we have that. So, acknowledging our own faults is the first step towards like personal growth, right? Personal growth and self-improvement, right? Recognizing areas that, by recognizing the areas that where we may be wrong, gets us the gives us the opportunity to improve upon that, right? Improve upon that. We can begin to work on that, right? So it will lead to a maybe more fulfilled life. And when you dig out your own faults, right? Instead of letting others dig out their own faults, it's best to dig out your own faults, right? Instead of giving them the chance. So when you dig out your own faults, you will be able to cultivate humility, right? You will become more humble, knowing that what it reminds us that we are not perfect. We are not perfect. That and there is always room for improvement. In a way, this also helps us understand the other person, right? When they make mistakes, then we will know that even I used to make this mistake. Sometimes we forget that we make that time. We uh, when we become so good at something, sometimes, right? When we become really good at something, then we tend to forget that that person may just be learning, and we tend to, why are you making this mistake, right? We tend to do like that. But digging out your own faults always will help you understand that other person is also not perfect, and they are trying to what do you call, improve themselves, right? So also by addressing our own faults, we would be we would reduce harm to others, right? From our actions. That's the thing. Sorry. So that's the thing. Of course, from a spiritual perspective, like recognizing and working upon one's own faults is the core meaning of a spiritual development, right? Spiritual developments basically, lojong, basically means like practicing or training your mind, right? Practicing or training your mind. So that's the thing. So there is a lojong that I really like, and it's by Shaoba, I think. I am sure there's a book here, right? The in the book, is this the Wisdom of the Masters? A small book, Wisdom of the Master, Wisdom, Wise Words of the Kadam Masters. Yeah, I think that's the book, right? In that book, there's one specific part where Shaoba, he himself is a Kadam Master, where he is chastising himself, right? Always like you listen to Dharma, but you're doing this. So basically, he may be saying to himself, but this type of chastising yourself or may lead to there must be a balance, right? So the philosophy of what we call middle way is also there. Chastising yourself too much may lead to low self-esteem and so on. But it's important to have a balance between recognizing and knowing and finding out your own faults and doing that, but also like having the confidence to do other things, right? So that's the thing. In why does like why do we when somebody points out our fault, why do we tend to be defensive, right? It's because of the from a Buddhist perspective, it's because of our self-cherishing mind, right? So the self-cherishing mind or ignorance, which we call, right, has been towards eons and eons of previous life and so on. Then this creates a view of the things being intrinsic, right? Things being intrinsic and your own self being intrinsic. So when you yourself have the view of the intrinsic, right? Intrinsic, then when somebody attacks that view as then it hurts our what do you call the gross embed self-cherishing mind, right? Then we tend to get defensive. We have that. We as a person, I as a person, is a what do you call solid, intrinsic nature and uh, object, right? As a intrinsic solid object. So we don't know that the I is simply imputed by our own thoughts, right? I is basically in the sevenfold reasoning and etc. Uh, there is that dissecting your own limbs, dissecting your what do we call dissecting the limbs and finding where the I is. This, if you practice this, which is a really hard topic, and it's about emptiness, right? It will reduce the what do we call self-cherishing mind. Then once the self-cherishing mind has been reduced, of course the when somebody else points out your own fault, you won't feel that defensive and the aggressive nature that you usually feel, right? So the core of this, all of this, is the self-cherishing mind. The core of all the problems, that is the self-cherishing mind. So also one thing is here, the one thing here is also like dig out your own faults. That is being wise. That is really being wise, right? Be unconcerned about fault of that is being virtuous. So of course, for ourselves, we have the ability to change ourselves, right? Others, whether we can change or not, we don't know, right? So here I can relate to Shantideva's verse, which is really good, right? Focus on what if you can't change it, then what's the thing? What's the use of worrying about it? If you can change it, then why are you worrying about it? So this too can be applied here. Others, there may be a possibility that we can change them or we cannot change them, right? So instead of being concerned with others' faults and trying to change others' faults every time you point at others' faults and trying to change them, point on yourself and change the faults of yourself, right? This is a factor that we can control. This is a factor. Changing ourselves is like working on yourself. You have the freedom to do whatever thinking you have, right? The other person has a different perspective, different. It may be possible to change them while teaching, while giving them advice and so on. But it's also like better to focus on yourself, right? Than being the bringing up the faults of others always, right? That's the thing. So verse 13, I think is that. So now we go on to verse 14. So sincerely nurture us. This is most wonderful. So here we can talk about. I think like I still have still more essential advice. So listen, sharing confidences with someone as soon as you meet. So here he would highlight many mistakes, right? From previously in the verses, he was highlighting of being the attributes of being virtuous, being careful, being skillful, and so on. But here he is going to show that sharing whatever, sharing secrets, right? Sharing secrets with someone as soon as you meet is a mistake. Of course, this will be emphasized and elucidated in the later verses, so I won't be talking that much itself. Of course, you know why it's a mistake, right? Sometimes, like, we must strike a balance between being open-minded and being too sharing, right? Being open-minded is not the same as being trust sharing. Being open-minded doesn't mean that whenever you meet somebody and you just share it with them, right? It doesn't mean that. Being open-minded means like it's a quality that involves being acceptive, right? Acceptive, receptive, right? Is it receptive to a wide range of ideas and information, right? Being acceptive of the fact of that, like instead of just denying them. That means being open-minded. But be, being open-minded doesn't mean somebody you just met, you told them, you tell them that I'm going to, you tell them their own, your what do we call life plans, right? Your life plans and so on. So basically, the verse is saying that you should have like a what do we call uh, what do we call have caution in whom you trust and how do you trust. So trust is actually we build gradually, right? We build gradually. So we build trust to that person by verifying their claims and their actions and so on, right? So here basically that they are saying that then if on checking you know he is dishonest, continue to trust is a mistake, right? Once somebody is you find out them to be dishonest, then if you still continue to trust them, then it creates more problems for you, right? So basically here is saying once he's dishonest, don't trust him. don't give them the don't give them the chance to what do we call don't give them the chance to m- make use of your trust again. So here basically he's talking in the lay terms, right? Trust meaning like of course we must have trust in the other person, but it must not be a blind trust. There's a saying in Tibetan, it must be an analyzed trust, right? Analyzed trust meaning you should trust them, but after a time period of analyzing and so on, even your own guru, right, whom you can just before accepting them as a guru, and you must see whether they are what do you call showing you the right spiritual way of developing or not, then accept them as a guru. So here basically even though it's here it's applied to normal what do we call relationships or so on, we can apply it to our guru devotion as well, right? Before having the guru, after having the guru devotion, then it's like basically of trust, right? So that's the thing. And also that's the thing, I think. Yeah, pursuing this verses, I think like it's self-explanatory, right? So I'm sure there isn't much that I need to explain. Pursuing activities with careless people is a mistake. Seeking a long-term relationship with someone unkind is a mistake. Taking someone without faith as a disciple is a mistake. So here the we can apply the we can apply the guru devotion. How, like, if the guru themselves is unkind, right? The one that you want to accept as your guru is unkind, then accepting them as a guru is a mistake, right? We can apply that. So taking someone without faith as a disciple is a mistake, right? So yes, we must have faith, but the faith should not be the blind one, right? It should be the analyzed and the thing one. So here, basically, what they are saying is, in a way, it is a what we call the four reliables, right? In Tibetan Buddhism. Okay, taking someone with a compassion is a guru is a mistake. Relying on no conscience as a friend is a mistake. So okay, just highlight the mistakes. Giving instructions to those who don't listen is a mistake. Having important consultations with the ignorant is mistake. So all of these are highlighted as mistakes, right? So of course you will know from your own world experiences that these are mistakes, right? So when you have recognizes this as a mistake, then if you still don't give them up, right? If you are feeling like somebody dishonest is there and you still associate them and trust them blindly, it's a mistake. So basically, it can be, we must also keep in mind that this is not saying in the one way direction, right? It's we must also balance this with the that person can be impermanent, right? That person is impermanent and he can change. They can change, but during the initial phases, it's saying that. So from here, I think I'll stop here, right? Because I'm sure you all are tired from the work and just talking me blabber about blabber about things is like a. Then I think we should now indulge more in gossip, right? Indulge more in gossip. So the session itself, right? So basically, from here, I want you to have the two takeaways for today, right? Don't gossip and try to reduce your gossip what we call level of from a CEO to a junior level, right? So that's what yourself and focus on yourself instead of focusing on others' faults, right? Focus on your own faults so that you can what we call improve, right? You can improve yourself. This is the area that you can what do you call know on. You can improve on, right? So that's thing. So I think there may be a discussion.
You can start your gossip or you can choose whatever you want.
I don't have a gossip to share. Is there like anything special? Like
So remember you asked two questions. Are you going to talk about it now or you want it later?
two questions about
Your
what?
your frustrating question.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Is it about that here?
This one is the frustration one.
First
The
session.
other one is the happy one.
Okay, okay. So in the previous session, I think we were talking about what do we call bootlicking, right? And there was like some questions that we were not able to cover, but there we got like some perspectives about how they handle the situation, right? So what I would like to say is navigating through a workplace where environment where bootlicking is like really towards the boards can be prevalent. It's challenging for the person, right? Yeah, they may be the only person that may always get the work and so on. But as we told right now, as we just talked right now, it's important to, instead of focusing on what the others are saying, others are doing, it's important to focus on yourself. But there may be a situation where it will excess, what do we call? It will exceed, right? It will exceed the level. Then comes the how you handle the situation depends upon you, right? So instead of you bootlicking because they are bootlicking, it's important for you to maintain your own integrity and behavior and values that you have as a person, right? So generally, as we talked in the previous session, short term, long term, right? Short term, it may benefit them. Long term, what you have done is the thing that will show up, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing. And another thing was what? Oh yeah, I am considerate towards other. I think this was the one thing. I'm considerate towards the other, but that somebody else, s- the other people are not considerate towards me, and I feel frustrated, or was it taken advantage of, and so on. So the answer is really what I talked right now, also, right? It can be quite challenging and disheartening when you feel that your considerate behavior towards others is not reproach like returned, right? Returned. But we can also lower our expectations, right? Like, keep in mind that everyone has different perspectives and ways of showing consideration. Your way of showing consideration may not be their way of showing consideration. Each and every person may have their own unique way, right? So what you perceive as a considerate behavior may not align with someone else's considerate behavior, right? So sometimes you can communicate with them, right? I'm just trying to offer some solutions. Like, you can communicate them with them as their actions as I'm not saying from an argument point of view, but just clear communication, right? So being considerate is a commendable trait, right? It's a really good trait of a human value. So it's also important that you are not neglecting yourself fully, right? It's also important to know your mental well-being, know your mental limit, right? Limit and so on. So that's the thing. I think also, like, cultivate appreciation, right? You recognize that your own considerate nature, and what do we call rejoice in that, right? When you rejoice in that, it will become more better for you and your resilience and your perspective and so on. And you should also focus on what you can control, right? The first focus on control is yourself, not the others, as we talked right now. Then the thing is, when you can't, the Shantideva's text, Shantideva's that verse comes into play here also. So that's the basic thing. So that's the thing. Now I think we can talk about, I think, the gossip one, is it? or frustration? Okay, okay. Is it the Mentimeter, I think?
Okay, so we're gonna read together again. And the blue box will show the one that I'm currently reading. So, share one frustrating event that took place just now. Staff was tasked to do a presentation to the boss who reported sick last minute and had to take over the presentation without any materials. So I think this one is a teacher. Wednesday is a busy day with lots of students. A student is more interested in toys than worksheets. Okay, so others' priorities become ours at short notice, and it's frustrating as we do not have the full picture and preparation work is needed. Hi. My video didn't upload after many tries. It was so frustrating. Okay, so this, I cannot go down. So frustrating. Okay. Okay, so this one is, I wake up early to fry the omelette luncheon meat with bread. Put on the kitchen table, and then I have two visitors. Two birds came and share my breakfast. There goes my breakfast. Other frustration was other people don't know how to work properly and work well and became my problem in the end. Okay. This frustration is high cholesterol food cooked lovingly by a family member who had a heart attack. So it's like death from ever loving, death from over loving. How to tell the cook thank you, but no thank you. Okay, and I had to spend most of my time listening to a colleague ranting about her tough time at work. I can't focus on my work and the load is piling up. This will go on tomorrow for sure. Enough is enough. The frustration is being taught and reminded how to apply Dharma practice in daily life. But I'm frustrated over being constantly mindless of it. And I didn't apply it often enough.
Okay.
And then this one, wow, a bit violent. Frustrating when people start invading my privacy. They have no respect. Okay, maybe it's my tone, sorry. I need to be considerate. Just wanting to kill their curiosity, such gay BEOs. Then you become a topic of their discussion. It's good that they learn noble silence. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's all my tone. It's not your it's all I own self make the drama, okay? yeah, my own spice, my own masala.
Yeah, I can see here that there are a lot of gossips here also. So let's have a discussion, right? Instead of like you asking questions and I'm just answering it again and again, right? Let's just have like on the third one, right? On the gossip one, frustrating when people start invading my,
Okay, this one, this one.
yeah, the last one, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
So how would you in a situation, right? How would you in a situation would handle this?
So now it's a discussion.
Yeah, now it's a,
Because this is one person's thought, right? So we can share all of our other thoughts also.
yes. If
That-
you are faced with a person that invades on your privacy when you are working, right? Or is it working? Or
Yeah. Then I think I'll just smile at them.
yeah. Anybody who wants to share? Can you see?
Maybe somebody asked me a question that I don't want to answer, then I'm like, I have no comment. Yeah. Hey, that's my answer. You all got answer? Joshua, your face look very frustrated. Have to arrow you. Ask back the same question.
Ask by the same
Wow,
question.
he very clever.
Okay.
Oh. Maybe people not private.
So maybe I'll make this a little bit different, right? So they may be invading on your privacy because of their own curiosity to gossip, right? Wanting to gossip. So what's your views on, let's say, gossiping?
Gossiping gossiping creates good friendship.
Good friendship.
No
Long
gossip,
term.
no good friendship.
So basically gossip, right?
Gossip. Yeah. Just now I think Rumji mentioned if you gossip, then you destroy trust. But I think it works other way also. You
Yes,
gossip,
yes.
you build good trust.
Okay.
I,
Okay. Any like contrary views on that? Of
No,
course, my
you gossip within your team, you build camaraderie within your team, and you gossip about other team, then this team, my team becomes stronger.
wow. I think I'm the only one against gossiping. I'm the only one against gossiping, and I'm going to have fight a losing fight. Yes. Anybody else? Yeah, you can share your views on
Kalau you,
anywhere.
if people gossip, then 你怎样? Can people gossip with you? I mean, no, if people gossip about you. Because Uncle Lau is very senior, he got a lot of wisdom Uncle Lau. Uncle Lau, 如果人家 gossip about 你 leh, or if they ask you questions that you don't want to answer, then 怎么办?
Best of luck.
Uncle Lau say just accept the situation.
Oh,
Very
wow.
good, very good
Yes.
practitioner.
Just accept the situation.
接受
Okay.
yeah.
Any other views? Yes.
I think sometimes I will be keen to hear what is the topic of gossip. Yeah. And then, I mean, if you look at it positively, it allows me to get to know that person better, because if the person talk about something, right, it means this person is mind about that thing. So it shows a little bit of the character and maybe the preferences, or maybe something that this person is upset about. So sometimes we may clarify or disagree, yeah. But sometimes if the gossip become too toxic, I will choose to walk away. Yeah.
That's good.
If it's too toxic, I'll just walk away. I'm very busy. I just siam.
That's a really good view. Like gossip to a certain level, right? Not become the CEO of the gossip, but like let it go till maybe what's the after junior, after entry level, maybe manager, then not let it go to the CEO level of gossip, right? Then anybody else on that? Yes, Joel.
Okay, this might not be what if gossip is a form of background check and intelligence gathering.
Well, I didn't.
Example.
Okay.
Sometimes in my industry, there's this particular person, maybe he's a freelancer or what, he just came to our agency or whatever. So sometimes you just ask the very innocent questions like, hey, do you know about this person? And then you need some background of that person, but it comes to you as a gossip. Because among your colleagues, they talk, oh, I met him somewhere. But it can become a form of like things that I can gather about knowing this person.
Okay.
It may not be true or half true, but I think sometimes in workplace, we use that as a background check as
Yeah.
well as intelligence gathering.
Yeah. Oh.
For example, we need to know some credentials of someone,
Okay.
but it can often change into a idle talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, let's define by gossip and idle talk, right? So idle talk basically stems from this, what do we call, in the Abhidharma text, right? Is idle talks basically stems from the what do we call, kleshas, afflictions, yeah, afflictive emotions, right? So whether the talk is being idle talk or not depends upon the intent and the motivation, right? So it's from just to know is not a klesha, it's not an affliction, right? Want to know what the person is doing is not a klesha. So it's not idle talk, right? Just want to know. Just want to know him because like I don't want him to be my competitor, or I don't want him to come into my, what do we call, work and take over my this job, and this motivation to know him is idle talk, or what we call gossip, right? So we must firstly to know really about whether you're gossiping or not, the motivation, as I talked in the before, like reflecting on the motivation, right? I would say you're doing your due diligence, is it?
I think many times it somehow has two elements.
Yeah.
You always intermingle with talking idle about someone, or they somehow will interject some gossip into it. You
Yeah.
can't avoid it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Yes. Anyone else want to share about gossip?
It depends which side you're on, though.
Huh?
It depends which side you're on, though.
Okay.
If you're in the one being gossip, or the other side that you gang up and gossip that person. Because if you're on the other side, I kind of agree with with some of the comments. Right, it's actually a team building event.
Okay. Okay.
Because normally a lot of companies, they always have a common enemy or common weak link that they like to gossip about.
Then. Okay. Yeah, in a way, yeah. In a way, like now it becomes more harder for me to explain as we go into the complexities of the gossip, right? The levels of the gossip. Then, as long as it's coming, the main thing here is that as long as it's coming from the motivation is pure, right? That's what I would like to say. Okay. Anything more? Yeah, Lillian.
Actually, I've got a question to ask, right? Because gossip can be the truth or not the truth. But how do we make the truth interesting so that we don't have to gossip in the end? Because at the end of the day, if I were to make a statement, this is a truth, the conversation dies, right? So how are you going to add spice to the truth without gossiping?
Okay, how to exaggerate the truth.
So that it doesn't be a killer conversation, the conversation that kills everything.
Okay. Got it. Like basically, let's think of an example. Oh, I can't think of an example right now. So like so even though it's true, we need to add a little bit spice, right? Spice. But the main thing here is the intent, reflecting on the intent, right? However you word it, so make it maybe like not the egoistic type, to let the other person know that, oh, I'm a good talker. If it comes from this type of, what do we call, motivation, that the afflictive, where the you have that attachment to the self and etc., right, etc., then it becomes problematic. Otherwise, I feel like adding a little bit of spice may be okay, as long as the motivation is okay. Then anything else? Maybe anyone's? Okay. Let's see here. How to take over presentations. Okay. So here, others' priorities, is that one? Yeah. Others' priorities become ours at short notice, and frustrating as we do not have the full picture and preparation work is required. And that can be also done with that, right? Staff tasks to do with the presentation, both reported sick at the last moment, had to take over the presentation without any materials, right? So these two can be stacked together, and the bootlicking also can be stacked together here, right? Yeah. Meaning like others' priorities become ours at short notice, right? Others' priorities meaning like, suppose somebody else bootlick the boss to make the what do we call, change the change decision at the last minute, because the other person was not, what we call, prepared or something. So from my opinion, of course, it's easy, right? So I would like to know from your perspective, right? Your sharing of what would you do in a situation? How would you apply your maybe spiritual practice or human values to it?
I think just have to be objective about the situation, and if it's like really last minute, or you were informed last minute, then you can just share objectively the limitations and constraints.
Okay. Communicating with the boss.
I think in this situation, for me, it depends whether this person keep reporting sick.
Okay.
If this person reports sick only once, then I think, oh, okay, just one time I will just do whatever presentation, right? But if this person keep reporting sick, right, then I will probably call an ambulance to pick him up to the hospital. Make sure that he's really sick. It will be difficult if this person is always reporting sick, I think.
Okay.
I think I cry.
Anybody else?
Any has to Joyce.
Joyce wants, yeah.
Usually in this kind of situation, I don't really have a choice because I'm the lowest human form in the office. So I just have to do, right?
Okay. Then anyone else? Like, let's make it type of discussion, right? If you do this, something else happens.
Rinpoche, I think it depends how much I need that job though. If I really need that job, I'll just keep quiet and do it.
Okay. Yeah. There's a different situation. Okay. Okay. So
Maybe sometimes some people are simply afraid to present. It's a
that can
fear
be,
in them
yeah,
that they cannot
public doubt.
overcome, so they cannot speak in front of people.
And that's why they are always reporting sick. Yeah. Okay, so it depends on the situation, right? Whether you know whether this happened due to woodlicking of the boss, right? Woodlicking of the boss, and it happened because you were too considerate of others, right? you are too kind, and because you are too kind, every time the other person is giving you this presentation job, there is a lot of in this simple situation, it can be like a lot of different factors going on, right? So what if it was because, right? What if it was because like you are the most considerate person, right? You are the most considerate person, and because of that, they thought, okay, I can take a civic leave, and this considerate person, yeah, the efficient and the considerate person will do it, right? Have you ever been faced with such a situation? And how would you deal with it? In a sense. Yeah, just share your thoughts. Just as we have different perspectives, we will learn more, right? Because office culture is alien to me right now.
For my situations, I think I'm a bit different because I work as a freelancer. So most times my work is by per project, but I have encountered many situations where some other people's task has actually landed onto my plate unknowingly. But at that moment, there is frustrations coming up. But I always tell myself I want to do better than that person, because if I go, he will have to take over.
Okay.
So that in telling myself that I want to do better than them, it just convert that kind of frustration into something that I want to do. And then I just want to prove to them that I can do a better job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You want.
Like I'm just thinking, is this like using a poison to counter another poison? Because
Yeah, motivation because of
yeah, because like the coming from the idea that to show the person that I can do better.
the better than them.
So it's
The
like using
motivation.
one poison to suppress another poison.
Yeah. So sometimes poison is nice. Feels like, right? Yeah, Joshua wants to share something.
I will treat it as a training ground.
Wow.
Anyway, it's a job.
Yes.
It's just a job.
Yeah, yeah. But
Something
if you think, of course, like professionally and whichever personally, there may be difference, right? But from a spiritual practice point of view, it's better to treat it as exactly as Joshua has said, as a new learning, right? A learning ground. Once it starts to happen again and again, that depends on how you handle it, right? Unless you are really spiritual practitioner, then you, no matter what whatever work you come, you will do it. But there is a limit to what we can do, right? Then anyone else? I think like one or two. That, oh, second slide. Oh, the new one.
You want to go now to the nice one, the happy one?
Oh, this is the happy one.
Yeah.
Oh,
this,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is the happy one. Should we read? Or?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is the happy one, right?
And if you have any happy responses, you can still put it in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go through. After sharing your frustrating incident, share one thing that happened in office and home today. One nice thing. So having the ability and free will to choose what is for my meal earlier on. Tomorrow, MC, yeah. MC, you know, Rinpoche is like
Main
a
character. Huh? Oh. Okay, so basically, this may be the person that caused the problem for the first person, right?
And then this is the same two birds again. Just now that two birds, and then now happy thing is also share breakfast with the two birds.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so this is my kind brother helped me to wash the dishes, mop the floor, and bought a new helpful kettle. My kind sister bought me new veggies and mushrooms to eat. So kind, oh? So nice. I noticed that I started losing more hair. So frustrating. So change of hairstyle, maybe. So this is a nice thing. The nice
the
change of
frustration.
hairstyle. Boss was understanding and listened to my stand-up talk only, no materials. Huh? He listened to my stand-up presentation carefully and gave his blessings and approval. Congratulations. And then my boss had a one-on-one talk with me to check on my well-being, but still no pay raise. Ooh. I didn't have to go to office today because my boss is still sick. So we had an online meeting. Yay! Yeah, the boss sick, also happy.
Sometimes here, like, yeah, getting is the boss is a really thing to be pitied on, right? Like, you really should have compassion for the boss because, like, we wish them to get sick every day. Wow. So, anyways, right. So I think we will stop the session just here, and maybe like the share breakfast with the two words, right? They have shared it in the frustration and the, what do you call, in the nice thing, right? So sharing breakfast with the birds may have you, it depending on your own emotion, it may have two effects, right? This person bird dirtied my plate and a breakfast, and you get angry and whatever, and it creates a negative situation, and you start the day negatively, right? But if you think, oh, they need food also, and that's why they did this, and oh, I can make a new one, and think like that and do it, then it becomes more positive, right? So on the situation itself, you can turn it negatively or positively. But of course, like even after like having a frustrating in the whole day, right? You may have a frustrating thing, and then you may have a good thing going on in the workplace, your home, or so on, right? Or like maybe with the with the two birds also. Then yeah. So whatever we do, we must focus on the good things that have happened, right? We have the tendency to focus more on the bad things that happen, that even though there are good things that happen in the day, right? Then when we focus on the negative, it will affect our mental health being for the long term, right? Whereas if we focus more on the positives that happened during the day, like the boss was helpful, boss was understanding, and boss checked with your well-being. These are good things that happened, right? Then it won't have the, what do you call, negative impact on our mental well-being in the long term. It will benefit to you yourself as a person, the main thing here, right? So I think we will stop the session
Okay.
exactly
Rinpoche,
here.
sorry, I just saw a message came in here instead of there. So it's anonymous, but regarding Rinpoche's question just now on the last minute work.
Okay.
Yeah, and then this friend is saying, focus on the task, gather information from the relevant person or the boss who assign you the task and quickly complete the task. So the frustration will be there, but when you focus on your task, the frustration will subside.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, we can, as Joshua said, we can change it into a learning path, or an, what do we call, to
Training ground.
right? In the way, what do we call, in the Lama Chöpa, I think there is one sentence where you turn the obstacle into the path, right?
Oh.
Obstacle into the path. And here, the obstacle may be you presenting in the last minute, and you change it into the path of your own self-improvement, That's the thing. So I think we'll stop here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure you all are tired. So yes.